Jams. We just had an awesome conversation, and we're about to get another one because I know Attorney April Preyar, she always gives us something to think about and something to talk about. How you doing today, Attorney April Preyar?
Hello, hello, hello. I am wonderful, Miss Xavier Fox. How are you?
I am great. It is good to see you and hear you this month.
Good to see you in my month. Yes, let's start
Yes.
the countdown. My birthday is in 13 days. Let's go.
Uh-oh, April in April, get down. Woo! All right.
April and April. Yes, ma'am.
So I know today you are about to lay down the law.
Absolutely. So I have two special guests, and I'm just really honored, is just an understatement to have these two women coming before you, because it's just the work that they do in the community is just, it's unsung. And I really think people need to know their names, know their work, and know what they're up to. So I don't want to spend a lot of time with the introduction because I don't want to cut away from their time. I will say this, my website was supposed to launch today. Womp womp, it did not. So it will be aprilpreyar.com, and my last name spelled a little bit differently. You reverse the vowels, and so it's PREYAR.com. In the meantime, you can follow me at Justice Junkie on Instagram, Facebook, and now TikTok as of about 12 hours ago.
Oh my.
So I just, yes, I'm parlaying into TikTok today. But that will be a site for my speaking, because I've gotten like 40 or so media appearances in the last 4 months. And I'm getting more and more opportunities to speak on the college stage, to speak before high school students, to speak before youth groups. And so I figured my speaking needed its own platform. So please check that out. But I do want to jump right in. I'll say this 2 cents about the Will Smith, Jada slap heard around the world that never seems to die, because I'm about sick of talking about it. It did give me the opportunity to get on TV though, so that was nice. But I'm about sick of this topic. It's interesting how many different angles people have been able to address it from. I have a good friend, Dr. Obari Cartman. He was on, I believe, ABC News talking about it was an example of toxic masculinity when Will stood up. I have another friend, McKenna, and her last name is escaping me right now, who has alopecia. She was able to address it from the angle of being an alopecia patient. So it's interesting, all the different topics. So all I will address is the criminal law aspect, which is we all saw a crime, a battery in the state of California committed on TV with millions of witnesses. So in that vein alone, it was a bad move. Now, granted, Chris Rock decided not to press charges, but it is still a crime. And Will would have been facing misdemeanor. He would have been facing a $2,000 fine. We know that's nothing to him. He would have possibly faced 6 months in jail. And I think it goes without saying that his defense, I was defending my wife, my family, has no place in a court of law unless Jada was in physical harm's way. Mm-hmm. If Chris had walked up and smacked Jada, or had attempted to smack Jada, and Will intervened, he would have been dead to right. Mm-hmm. But because there was no physical contact, and the other thing that nobody has pointed out, I haven't heard anybody talk about this, is it wasn't a hasty move. If you look at how far Will had to travel from his seat, from the moment he decided to get up, stepping onto the stage, and then walking across the stage, that will work all against him in front of a judge or a jury, because they would say every step was an opportunity to turn back. Every step was an opportunity to change his mind, and that would have worked against him in a court of law, not for him. So just keeping in mind that in California, and I did look up the statute, it is a battery. It does carry 6 months in jail. We know he wouldn't have gotten a day in jail unless the judge is like the judge and Jesse, we don't know for sure, but and a $2,000 fine, that's the max he could have gotten. But we see all the damage that is done to his career, and the rest remains to be seen. But had it been a criminal charge, that's what he would have been facing. That's all I'm going to say about that. And so with that, I want to welcome a dear friend of mine. I was thinking about it the other day doing the math. We've known each other at least 25 years, because I believe I met her when I was still in law school, and that would be 25 years ago. And she is this beautiful vocalist, and that's worth me saying, because that's how we met. She was a vocalist and I was a performance poet, and we just were in this rotation where we see each other several times a week. She hitting the mic and I'm trying to get on the list. She hitting the mic and I'm trying to get on the list. I'm a mediocre performance poet at best. That's why I say I was trying to get on the list. She's an excellent vocalist. So she was always, her path to the stage was paved. But since then, and then we were both in Chicago when this was happening. She has since moved on to Memphis, and there she's doing some profound work in the community around reproductive rights, so profound in terms of helping poor, Black, brown, LGBTQ people not only know their reproductive rights, but have access to resources. And this even led her to speak before, correct me if I'm wrong, the Senate in Tennessee, which cut her off mid-sentence. So with that, I'm going to bring the phenomenal and the beautiful, she's just glowing, y'all. Y'all should all be on Zoom with us. You can see this pretty skin glowing through the screen and these amazing earrings and her flowing locks. I'm going to bring Miss Cherie Scott to the microphone. Welcome, my friend.
Welcome to the show, Miss Scott.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you.
You hear that beautiful melodic voice, just even when she's speaking, you can just hear it. It just sounds like
Yes.
So I want to know, so you're originally from the South, right? And you moved to Chicago?
No, I'm a Detroit native, actually. And when my parents divorced in the early 80s, my mom moved to Memphis because we, like all the Black people, we got deep roots in the South, and ours was in Mississippi. Memphis was like the kind of closest urban area. So I grew up a part of my life in Detroit, my childhood, a part of my childhood here in Memphis, and then moved to Chicago in '99 and lived there for about 12 years. And moved back to Memphis after my mother actually fell ill and requested me to come home. So I moved back here, but I wanted to keep doing the work that I was doing in Chicago, where my work actually began for about 3 or 4 years up there. And there wasn't a reproductive justice organization in the entire state. And my mom asked me to continue doing the work that I was doing for mamas and babies and families. And so I started Sister Reach the same year I moved back. And we're a little over 10 years old.
I know, I saw that. I saw it when I was researching you and seeing your spots in Essence and other publications, her shining face. So why don't you tell us what Sister Reach is?
Mm-hmm. So Sister Reach is a reproductive justice organization. Reproductive justice is a framework that was created by Black women in Chicago. As a matter of fact, in 1994, during the Clinton administration, when the Clinton administration was trying to pass universal health care, Black women wanted to make sure that our needs, not just abortion, but other needs, our access to employment, our access to the doctors of our choice, to public health resources, to public aid resources, housing, that folks, even if they were identified in the LGBTQIA spectrum, would be not only a part of the planning, but the execution and the leadership around what the universal health care package is supposed to look like. And so Sister Reach does that work. We work from a four-pronged strategy of education and outreach, policy and advocacy, culture change work, and harm reduction. And so for us, that looks like community-based discussions about issues that impact our lives, doing sexual health education with folks, young people, as well as adults and seniors. That means with our policy and advocacy, we take folks to the Hill in Tennessee every year. We also work on the regional level, getting folks to the Hill in Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, and Arkansas to speak with their legislators about issues that impact their lives. Voter education, getting people to the polls, giving them something to drink and something to eat while they're there. That culture change work is because we are in the Bible Belt that we do a lot of organizing with churches. We do a lot of organizing with people of faith and across religion, as well as, as vast as traditional African religion or Christian or Muslim. We work across the interfaith spectrum about issues that impact our lives. And then our harm reduction work, we have a now national distribution safe sex kit program that really switched during COVID. It was a local program here, but we're a nationally and even an internationally recognized organization. And so we were getting requests from as far as Australia to as far as California for our free safe sex kits. So we make sure that male condoms, female condoms, dental dams, lube. We were sending PPE, masks and hand sanitizer to the post office. Said we couldn't send hand sanitizer anymore, but we've been doing that, and we continue to do that. Where we do free HIV testing here. Where we have a pantry where we're offering food and clothing, accessories for our community, not just women and girls, but the full family. And we're excited about our work. And then because I am an artist, we have merged our arts with our activism. And so we launched the Memphis Soul Music Festival last year, of which I performed along with others like Omar, an amazing artist, not only here locally, but nationally as well, to raise money for a housing community that we're trying to build right now in the city for Black mothers and children very specifically, but we're not turning anybody else away who live at the intersections of having HIV and raising their children, or being impacted by domestic violence and raising their kids, or living with substance use disorder and trying to raise their children because of the ways that opioid usage has been criminalized here in the state and across the country. HIV has been criminalized, and the poor sister's been just left to chance who are impacted by domestic violence. So we figure many times women who live at these intersections are the exact same woman with all of the issues at play at the same time. Memphis Soul Music Festival is a way for us to raise awareness about that in a palatable way for folks to have fun, but learn something that's important, that's happening in our community, and support our people. So that's a lot. That's a quick synopsis, but that's a lot of what we do. A lot of trainings. We train doctors. We do a lot of cultural humility and awareness so that folks aren't being abused and misused. Our programs serve heterosexual people, folks in the LGBT spectrum, poor people, rich people. We really don't care if you don't know about your body, and if you need to have agency and self-determination and support. Our job is to be that advocate for you, but not necessarily from a top down. Our tagline is that we are the people that we serve. So a lot of people at this organization, myself included, have had to navigate some of the issues that we serve. We do service on behalf of, and so we do it for ourselves, our families, and our communities.
Well, you gave me a lot to unpack, which is great. So I want to start with the word justice. So when you said that you are a reproductive justice organization, that struck me, because I think when people hear the word justice, they immediately think of courts, they immediately think of mass incarceration. And I would imagine reproductive health kind of falls away and isn't top of mind. So with that being the case, take us back 10 years, not where Sister Reach is now with all these beautiful resources, but how did you get this organization off the ground in the heart of the Bible Belt?
Yeah, so justice very specifically is the organizing element. It is the piece that Black women wanted to ensure that folks understood that the folks themselves were leading their own work, right? So reproductive justice is a human rights framework. So every element of human rights, if it is not at play in the lives of people, then they can't fully realize what reproductive justice looks like in their lives. Before I even launched the organization, as far as being more public, I did a one-year needs assessment here in Memphis and across the state, just trying to figure out, what's missing. We don't need to come and duplicate work, but what isn't necessarily happening in the city or in the state. And what I heard more than not is that Black women weren't necessarily showing Capitol talking to legislators about the issues that impacted our lives, that decisions were being made on behalf of our families and our communities without our input or our leadership, which goes directly back to the why that reproductive justice was created. Reproductive rights is a part of our work, but we don't just focus on abortion, because as Black women, we recognize that before a person even gets to many times to the decision of having an abortion, there were too many other systemic issues that were left to chance of why the sister had to make a choice to have an abortion. Many times women are having abortions that are already mamas. Many times women are having abortions because they are victims of rape or incest or have been molested, right? So when I first started that work, like I said, I did a lot of community conversations. I started working at a local abortion clinic here where I was able to do sexual health education, hold a sister's hand while she was having a procedure, but also teach her about her menstrual cycle and give her skills and tools so that she didn't have to come back to the clinic again, right? I have my own story of having an abortion and what that looks like for my life. And I was actually in Chicago when that happened to me, and just really being misled by a place that I thought was an abortion clinic that actually was not an abortion clinic, but that's how they were positioning themselves in the yellow pages. So I was like, I'm going to get me an abortion, right? Because it wasn't a good idea for me to bring a child into the world at that time. I think it's really interesting that those who are, more considered pro-life, although I don't think that they're pro-life, because pro-life means that you care about people once the baby gets here and all the way through their lives. I'm pro-lives. I can't even say I'm pro-choice, right? I'm about the life of the entire family. It's not just about can a woman have a right. For me, that's a very white feminist way of thinking about access, because all of us don't have access the same way. Undocumented sisters don't have access the same way. People who are trans identified don't have access in the same way, or are not honored and respected in the same way. And so, I wanted to make sure that centering reproductive justice as a lens meant that it wasn't just going to the Capitol and telling folks what we deserve to get. It was, let us demonstrate the ways that white supremacy and systemic oppression impacts our lives. Who's responsible, right? Let's take this all the way back. Let's get a racial justice analysis in there about the fact that, one of the things I say when I talk about this is that Black women have never really had a correction or redirect from being brought over to this country from the continent and being forced to breed in this country. We are still having children like we are slave women, not necessarily because we want to be self-determining and have a large family, right? So in order for us to be able to make better decisions about our bodies, it's important that we learn about our bodies. Once I was taught about my reproductive health, right? So reproductive health is definitely a part of that. And my sexual health, about, what it even meant to ask a partner to use a condom and not feel intimidated to do that. Many times sisters can't ask that. For some folks, that means that they're going to be harmed if they ask their partner or their husband even, right? Or, what does it look like to have a conversation with a wife and a husband and say, just because you are her husband, that don't mean you get to roll over in the middle of the night and she's just supposed to give you some if it's against her will. So we talk about consent, right? So when we think about justice, we're thinking about every human rights element and how that operates in the scenario of reproductive and sexual health, wellness, consent, empowerment, right? As well as that sister having the tools and the strategies, or that person having the tools and the strategies to make sound decisions, informed decisions about their health and wellness without interference from individuals or the government, right? So we're seeing in the country with, right now, this is a big time with abortion rights hanging in the balance if we lose Roe v. Wade. But what that's going to look like for folks who look like you and me is going back to a life that you and I in our lifetime have not experienced. We haven't had to fall downstairs and beat ourselves in the stomach and drink bleach to not bring a baby into this world that we didn't want, or we're not necessarily skilled with some of the tools and information that we brought over from the continent about how even to do an abortion procedure naturally, right? We don't have those types of skills. So Sister Reach is that person, that organization that sits in the balance to do those things, but for me, I would love for abortion rates to go down, which means for me, I would love for sisters to have information about their lives and their bodies and know how to, about mammogram, their breast health, about mental health, right? About dietary health, not just reproductive and sexual health, right? But full holistic health and wellness. So reproductive justice is holistic in all of those ways, including the ways that we care for ourselves and love ourselves, where self-care is deeply rooted and centered into what that looks like for us. So 10 years ago, I wanted to see what all was happening. What also was happening is that adults weren't getting sexual health education. Everybody kept trying to put it on young people. Young people aren't the only ones who are having unplanned pregnancies, right? And many times, if grandmama had an unplanned pregnancy and mama had an unplanned pregnancy and now daughter has an unplanned pregnancy, Where at what point of the generational understanding, did somebody get some information and education? Right. So education is the biggest piece of the work that we do here. And it informs so much of why we push back the way that we do. We're living in a state not like Illinois, where comprehensive sex education is legal. It is illegal here in Tennessee to teach comp sex ed in schools, right? Even though Illinois, though, still has comp sex ed, everybody has not applied comprehensive sex education in the school environment or understands how to teach that. All teachers aren't being paid to do that. So young people, even in Illinois, are not getting the robust amount of information and class time, instructional time, access to safe sex information or contraception. Even when I worked in Chicago, I worked for one of the founding mothers of this framework at Black Women for Reproductive Justice, and we were located there in Hyde Park. One of the things that we had to do was go on the South Side and just see how even emergency contraception, how accessible was it to Black folks on the South Side. And it was not only locked behind, in the Walgreens or in the Rite Aid or whatever, it was locked behind the doors, just like condoms were locked up. So in Black and brown neighborhoods in Chicago and in Black and brown neighborhoods here, you can't get access to what white folks can get access to. And I think that is a very problematic and racist issue within the context of reproductive and sexual knowledge that we have to also highlight. That's what reproductive justice does. So we the soldiers on the front line, pushing back and taking the hits so that our people don't have to take those hits.
Let's talk about taking the hits. But before we do, please tell everybody where they can reach you, where they can follow you, and most importantly, where they can donate.
You can go to our website at sisterreach.org. That's sisterreach.org. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. And my young folks who work for the organization, they're trying to get us to do a TikTok. That's fine. We ain't on TikTok yet. We coming. And I'm also excited to say that we are at this time, and you can donate also on the website. And right now, April, we're working on expanding Sister Reach to Chicago. So I'm letting you know here first that we are working right now to bring some of the work that began for me in Chicago. The organization I worked for had closed the year that I moved away. We have not had Black women leading this type of work in this robust type of way since 10.5 years ago. That's problematic. We want to also be able to come back. I want to come back to where my work started, to where, I became a woman, where I learned about my body, and offer that is there as well. So sisterreach.org is how you can reach us.
Awesome. So I want to talk about taking those hits, and that'll probably be my last question. So I'm going to encourage anybody on here to Google Sharice Scott, Tennessee Senate. And not Google, go on YouTube and sit there and watch the clip of her speaking to the Senate and getting cut off. And so I want to talk about how it is you ended up speaking to the Senate and what happened that particular day, because you talked about, the way reproductive rights are viewed right now in the United States is from a white woman's perspective. I would go further, say it's a very paternalistic perspective.
Oh, it is.
And even though, even at my law school, we spent a good amount of time on reproductive rights and learned it was a fundamental constitutional right, et cetera, et cetera. And I was at a liberal school in Washington, D.C., all that in mind, it still was from a very much of a view of, this is a man, a white man, and I'm gonna tell y'all women how to do it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna tell y'all what you can and can't do with your own body. And so using that as your lens, I want you to tell us about what happened when you went before the Senate in Tennessee.
Yeah, I want to get some clarity. I'm saying that reproductive rights has mostly been championed by white feminists, right? However, anti-abortion antics absolutely have been spearheaded by old white men, right? One of the things that I was invited to do a testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2019, because I was a reproductive justice advocate, and because I'm a Black woman, and because I've had an abortion, right? And so I wanted to lift up the systemic issues that inform why folks have to have abortions in the first place. And I also wanted to turn on its head the ways that, you know, I really want to lift up and highlight Christian extremism, which is don't have anything to do with Jesus, don't have anything to do with holiness, has nothing to do with love and compassion, but everything to do with control and violence, right? I think it's important, you know, to lift up that, you know, I also got a chance to speak at the Supreme Court in December 1st last year. And one of the things that I said was, you know, let's talk about why white folks are so, and white men very specifically, white Republicans and conservatives are so intent on making sure that abortion is no longer legal. I think that it's really important that we lift up that the birth rate of white people in this country has drastically reduced. Demographers say that by 2030, Black and brown people will be the majority of the United States of America population. And so for what that means is more Black and brown folks who vote more progressively means that white conservatives, and I'm like, even if I take away the race and just put conservatives, lose power, but just for the sake of being specific, white folks lose power if they don't have more white babies that are born into this country, right? So for me, I think the better question for me that I wanted to turn back over to the reproductive, pro-life wannabes is, why is it that white girls stop having y'all kids? Why are white women not having your children? Right? Your white mistresses, your white mamas, sisters, daughters, what is going on? It's not just that we just having babies out the frame, because white women are having abortions as well, right? But what it is that white women, because of economic inequities, educational inequity, social inequity, that Black and brown women experience, white women can plan a child out when they turn 30, 35, where, many of us are having children without particular tools and skills, or even the resources to get that private abortion that nobody knows about, right? We don't necessarily have those same types of opportunities and resources. So many times we're having those children, right? Abortion costs a lot of money. It's not cheap. And it's not covered by Medicaid in any Southern state, right? So I think it's really important to lift up that, because the rate of children of color, which means the rate of potential voters has increased, and the rate of white children have gone down, or the rate of potential power is decreasing. That's why this is what's happening. This is why. So it's really not, it has nothing to do with us, it has nothing to do with Black babies. It has nothing to do with we're gonna stand in front of the Planned Parenthood. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has something to do with the fact that white folks are losing control in this country, and they know it, and they are terrified about it, right? I think the other thing that was important for me to lift up is me being cut off as the only Black woman who was on that panel to speak. When Black women and our children have been used as the poster child of why they are so concerned about the Black community, the one time you get a Black woman to speak to you, you cut me off because I call you out on your hypocrisy. You know what I'm saying? You cut me off because I call you out on what this is really about. And I use your own Bible to try to show you how you are incorrect, right? People, abortion not in the Bible. The word abortion is not in the Bible, but there are instances of abortion that are happening in the Bible, and one in particular by the hand of a priest. So it's like, so the other thing about me that wasn't necessarily something that I did a lot of highlighting while I was in Chicago is that I'm an ordained minister, and I have been since 1997. I know my Bible, right? And so for me to be able to give you some scripture that shows that you're wrong was not something that they were willing to allow. And they didn't just try to cut me off. I think it's also important that they sick the bailiffs in the room on me, and then the sheriffs in the room on me. In a time that Black lives clearly do not matter, what it really meant for law enforcement to be told to remove me from the room. I told them not to touch me, right? They still cut off my mic. The white legislators got up and walked away, which to me was a very disingenuous thing as our state electeds, to not even allow as a constituent and a taxpayer in this state to be heard. You're just going to do me, which is what this whole issue has been. Dismissing the needs of low-income people, dismissing the voices of women and girls and people who can give birth in this country about why this particular healthcare service is important for you. So don't keep using our babies as your poster child, man. Right? Let's just talk about what this is really about. So, I'm calling out Christian extremism. I'm calling out white supremacy. I'm calling out theological fascism. I'm calling out racism. I'm calling out patriarchy, because that is my duty as a reproductive justice advocate, as a human rights advocate, as a Black woman who's needed a service. And when I went to get the service, you lied. If it's so righteous, why you gotta lie to me about what the service is that I'm coming to get? Either you giving me an abortion or you don't. But then when I got to the space, then they wanted, the first thing out of their mouths was, "Are you on food stamps?" No, I wasn't on no food stamps, right? And even if I were on food stamps, why was you lead with your stereotype of who I am? And when you realize you're dealing with an educated Black person or an educated person or individual who's trying to make a decision about their bodies, you want to manipulate them. What's up with the manipulation piece? So I think that, not allowing our young people and our people, period, to know about our bodies is just as important as taking critical race theory out of the school system, right? It's just as important as not letting folks cross the border who, let's be clear, Native and Indigenous people was already on this land, right? And it was cool to have undocumented people in this country when it was building America, but once Latinx and Hispanic people and other immigrants started becoming a larger population, all of a sudden we gotta, build walls and not let people over the border. So I think it's important to continue to call out the hypocrisy of, white conservatives, male, female, or otherwise. I think it's important to continue to center racism and reproductive oppression, sexual oppression as the issues that inform why they're making these decisions, and the lack of power, more importantly, that they got the same stats that I got. And they know that they are losing power in this country. I still think it's important for our people to understand our bodies and make health decisions that are strategic and, and make sense to be able to expand our families in ways that, don't put us in poverty, right? Or don't stop us from being able to thrive and to have lives deeply centered in abundance, which for me is the work, is for everybody to have abundance, right? And that everybody deserves that, no matter who they are, where they come from, how they get down, what they do. And it's no one individual's right to stop me from being self-determining about what I need, when I need it, and how I need it, if that's what works for me. Right. So I, really, that was really what that was all about. And they were just trying to shut down truth at the end of the day. They were trying to shut down being caught on the carpet by someone who looked like the poster child. Right. And even after they shut it down, I still turned around with no mic and said what I had to say. And when I was done talking, then I got up and I sat there for a moment. But let's be clear, doing this work has been extremely dangerous for me. Right, from having to put cameras around my house, to being followed down the expressway by white men, to having my face plastered over the internet like I'm just, all about genocide and eugenics. No, there is no more violent individual that walks this land than white people. And I think it's important that we continue to say that and prioritize their violence, and this is the outcome of what their violence has socialized us to be. So, those are the thoughts on there. That's what that was about. And I'd do it all over again if I had a chance. It was just, who knew it was going to go viral, right? Who knew? But I mean, that just worked out in our favor. It was great.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Sharice, I am so honored that you are here today. I'm so glad to see your beautiful face, friend. And I will definitely bring you back, because as y'all see, she's got a whole wealth of knowledge. And we can't fit it into this short time frame. And I do want you to come back and to continue to educate our listeners with the work that you are up to. Awesome. And with that, I'm going to shift gears. I see that my second guest has also arrived, and you two ladies should also know each other and interact and exchange information. I'll make that happen. But justice has a lot of different forms. And when I was putting up the post to advertise today's guest, my first thought is, social justice is not always something that we choose to do. It's often thrust upon us. And I think that is a very clear way to introduce my next guest. Chapearl Faulkner Wells is first and foremost a mama. And I had the pleasure of actually meeting her son before I met her. And I just want to speak to his nature before we dive into the gist of the programming. So Chapearl's son, Courtney, and I were in a network marketing company together. And we were both go-getters, and we were both going after them ranks and trying to get that money. And we had both gotten what's called a BMW bonus. What's significant is he about 20 years younger than me. And so he got this beautiful BMW that he was super proud of. But what's significant about Courtney is he was a natural connector and a natural leader. He was literally that kid that was the bright light who entered the room, and whether he spoke or not, everybody gravitated towards him. He had a diverse friend base. It wasn't just Black kids. It wasn't just Latinx kids. It wasn't just white kids. He had a nice diverse group, and they all adored him. And so imagine Chappelle's grief when her son's life was suddenly snuffed out. Not only suddenly snuffed out, but done in a mysterious manner, and she still doesn't know who the killer is.
Oh,
so this is what I mean when social justice as a calling is thrust upon you. So a lot of people, understandably so, that would have been the end of their story, because they would still be in the fetal position somewhere, unable to function. When their oldest child is taken from them, this beautiful boy who she adored and who she raised from a baby. But that's actually when Chappelle got to work. And that's what leads her here today. She was on a mission to find out what happened to her son. And that's actually how Chappelle and I met. So I counted today, we got 88 friends in common. And that's real friends. I don't mean Facebook friends, 88 friends, because she went to the high school that's closest to my house. And so I know just about everybody at her high school, from my church and from my neighborhood. And we had so many people. So when Courtney was killed, they immediately got to work and said, April and Chappelle have to talk. April and Chappelle have to talk. And so we talked. And even then, I think it was a week or so, it definitely was within 10 days after Courtney was killed, Chappelle was already on top of it. She was telling me where the cameras were in the area. She was telling me what the police had told her. She was telling me that the police story didn't make any sense, which I agree with, and we'll get to that. And her journey of trying to not only bring justice to her son, but also to keep his legacy alive, this vivacious, and he was just a ball of energy. Everywhere he went, a ball of love. Keep all of that alive has led her to an award-winning podcast. And it's called Somebody. And I was asking her yesterday, Chance is involved in that, Chance the rapper, because Chance was actually friends with Courtney, and he provided them with the theme song for the broadcast. And now this podcast has actually made a difference. Not just made a difference to the moms who are calling and crying and saying that, oh my God, they can't imagine Chappelle's journey or her strength, but also in actually getting some powers that be to finally start listening. So with that, I want to introduce Chappelle Wells.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, April. It's my pleasure being here.
Thank you. So I always forget to tell you, this is actually Xavier's show. You know, she just sublets an hour to me once a month.
Xavier, so thank you so much. I appreciate you for allowing me to be on. I'm just in awe of all these beautiful Black women. I love it.
Thank you for being here. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say. April, you do great shows. Okay, let's hit it.
So I just think that everybody needs to know Chappelle's story. So I actually listened to two episodes of Somebody today. And I would encourage anybody to go ahead and whatever you do a podcast, download the app. So I'm not a podcaster, but download the app so that you can listen. And each one is from a different perspective. And I listened to the episode where you talked about Courtney's best friend, Steve. And I also listened to the episode, I think it was the initial one, you did it on another platform and then moved it over to Somebody. But tell us your journey in terms of investigating Courtney's death.
Well, almost immediately, I knew that there was something that was wrong with this case, mainly because I know my son. I know Courtney was a fun-loving, exciting person, like you mentioned, April, but he was a person that actually avoided any type of conflict or violence. So when I arrived at the hospital and they told me that my son was shot, I found that was just like unbelievable. This was something that should not have happened to my son. And so I began immediately to have suspicious thoughts that very first day, because one of the things with the BMW bonus, Courtney didn't have excellent credit, so he needed a co-signer. So one of the first things that the detectives told me was, who owns the car? And so I thought that was strange. Instead of telling me where my son was killed, who shot him, and the first question out their mouth was, who owned the BMW? So immediately in my mind, I'm thinking maybe this was a traffic stop gone wrong. That was my initial thoughts. And so I was already, of course, distraught. So immediately, all of us sprung into action that day, probably hours after Courtney was pronounced dead. We went to the scene, we canvassed the area, we looked for clues, we found broken glass near where we knew that he would be parking in that neighborhood. And so we had all these clues, and for the police to tell me that they didn't know where it happened, who shot him, they didn't know anything, it just led to more suspicion. So probably around 48 hours, we received a what do you call that, like a TikTok, and it was just like describing someone on the scene, had a tow truck driver had saw something that night, and it showed Courtney on the ground, and it looked like he was being handled roughly. So again, I'm thinking, oh, something is wrong, something is
Roughly
wrong.
by whom? Roughly by whom?
By the police. And so I'm like, oh, this is something, they're definitely not taking care of my son properly if he was injured. So I continued to dig. Then my uncle ironically knew the chaplain at the hospital, which was Illinois Masonic Hospital. And he said that Courtney came in combative and violent. That's how they labeled him. So this is the chaplain who knew my uncle, who told me this information as well. So I'm like, okay, again, I know my son, he's not violent, he's not combative. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I need to go and figure out what's on these medical records. So my first thing was to pull them records from Illinois Masonic Hospital. As soon as the first page, it said they labeled him as violent, combative, agitated, and violent, combative, agitated to others, and a threat to others. So I knew that this was a negative connotation to my son, but I knew that this definitely was not my son. That's not who Courtney was. He was very respectful to police. I was the type of mother who taught him, okay, if you encounter police, this is how you act, this is how you behave. We drilled that into him. So I knew that something was wrong. And then I continued to read, and it says, and he was handcuffed. So that was something that stuck out to me as what happened here. So my son, the narrative that the Chicago Police Department told me is that my son pulled up to the officer, he grabbed his arm, he said, "I've been shot," and he collapsed, and he didn't say another word. That is the narrative that they are still holding on to 6 years later. And the thing is that we knew that that was a false narrative that they were placing on Courtney because it didn't match what they wrote in the report. So somewhere there is a discrepancy, somewhere someone is lying. And so I continued to dig and dig and dig. And I actually submitted a lot of FOIA requests for the videos to try to see what happened, because where Courtney was killed, it was a safety zone. So we had the school, we had like 2 schools there, plus a park, and it's right in front of the police station. So literally he pulled up to the 25th district, which is right behind where he was shot. So it's a safety zone. So they had plenty of cameras there that could have captured what happened to Courtney that night. So I knew that they had pertinent information that would be that easily, be able to download and find out what happened to my son. And so I was so upset because they fought me for over a year before they actually released the video. And they only did that because the Invisible Institute, which is an investigative journalism nonprofit organization in Chicago that actually forced them to actually go to bat for Courtney and release the tapes.
Tell me what, I was just actually listening to that episode when you got the tape from the police finally, and then it was, on some weird software, which is what happens to me all the time. And you were finally able to watch it. Tell us what you see of the police involvement on that video.
Well, like you were saying, April, we cannot confirm nor deny who shot my son. That part is still unknown. What I do know is how Courtney was treated in the hands of Chicago police. My son, as they wrote in their reports, he pulled up and asked for help. He said he was shot. He said he needed help. What I witnessed is my son being surrounded by 8 to 10 cops, and they did absolutely nothing. My son actually lay bleeding on the ground for 13 minutes until he was actually basically in cardiac arrest. And that's when they decided to put him on a stretcher, kind of throw him on a stretcher and try to get him to the hospital. So Courtney was actually pleading with them, begging them. You can see my son reaching up to them, begging them to help him. And they were looking at him, trying to figure out, I guess, did he steal the car? So what the podcast basically goes through, April, is like the whole scenario of how Black people are presumed guilty before they're innocent. And it shows the careless disregard for life, for Black life. And that's what happened to Courtney. So not only did they let him bleed out for 13 minutes before assisting him. And mind you, let me just make it perfectly clear to your audience that the ambulance is on the scene. The paramedics is there. So you have 8 to 10 cops who are trained for emergency intervention, as well as also you have paramedics there looking at my son bleeding to death. So when they decided to put him into the ambulance, they also took him to the furthest hospital. They took him to Illinois Masonic. This happened on Grand and Central. He could have gotten to Stroger or Mount Sinai. Both of them are level 1 trauma centers, and they could have actually taken Courtney that night, and they had available space as we investigated. And so these are the things that, for me, they made life and death decisions for my son. And like I said, I can't prove that they pulled the trigger, but what I can say is that they didn't do anything to save his life that night.
What has your interaction with the police been like since Courtney's death, since that day?
Well, if you listen to the Somebody podcast, you see that I have had several interactions with the police, and none of them have been pleasant. They have continued to deny the fact that my son was handcuffed. They have continued to berate me as a mom because they told me I'm having my own parallel investigation. And what was unique about the Somebody podcast is that I actually recorded them. And so I actually let the audience in on my secret tapings of the police. And so that was something that proved vital because, as a mom, it's my word against theirs. 9 times out of 10, the public is always going to believe the cops just because they're cops, not because they're trustworthy or anything like that, even though they have this long track record of lying, but because they're cops, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. But the tape did not lie. The tape did not lie, and they were not able to refute anything that I was saying that they said to me. Basically, they were very mean to me. They were very, very mean to me, but I didn't care because my purpose was to get justice for my son and to find answers about what happened to my son. So I didn't care how they treated me or anything like that. My point was, you are not going to sit here and lie on my son. You're not going to sit up here and label him as violent and combative and agitated to others when he was not, when he was actually doing the opposite, which was begging y'all to save his life.
Now, I think that's key because we talk about obviously police a lot on my broadcast, specifically Chicago police and their long history of evil doing and bad deeds. And that's one thing we haven't addressed. And most people don't know. I have represented some witnesses, I have represented some victims. And that's the theme. I've seen it with my own eyes, how poorly they are treated by Chicago police. It's like literally they milk them for whatever information they have. And then beyond that, they're incredibly disrespectful, dismissive. They disregard whatever they have to say. They disrespect them in terms of their time, and their treatment of them is atrocious. And so to hear that a mother of a son who was killed by gun violence, by the hand of whomever, my personal belief is Chicago police killed your son. I've told you that since the beginning. And I think that your investigation will yield more than theirs ever will. But how disgusting is that, that even if he was killed by a stray bullet, that would be how they responded to you, who clearly educated, articulate, know your stuff, took the time to learn the terminology. How can anybody else fare any better than you, who are not positioned as well as you are? So I want to talk about what your investigation has led to, because I hear that there was, at the last episode I listened to, at least I heard that there was a break. There's been a change with how the investigation was going. So tell us about that.
Well, after 4 years of investigating Courtney's murder, we finally sparked the interest of the City of Chicago Inspector General Office. So Joe Ferguson actually took a look at the case. And he took all the evidence that I had, and then he did his own investigation. That recently came out in January of 2022, where his findings basically state that beyond a preponderance of the evidence that Courtney was indeed handcuffed. Because this is crucial for me, because they continue to deny. And so when the City of Chicago, after they read their own inspector general report, they said they disagree with it, that none of this is true. So I'm like, this is the person that you put in charge of policing the police. And now because he came back with a negative finding, you're saying that it's not true. And so now we are petitioning to get the full unredacted report from the Inspector General to see if indeed we could definitely reopen his case and take him back to court. Because one of the things that we were having trouble with, as far as like lawsuits and everything like that, is that they're saying that this is perfectly legal, that they don't have to justify all the things that they do. They can do whatever they want. They can kill us with impunity. You know what I'm saying? So the thing is that what we're seeing now is that we have to change laws here. And so one of the things that we're working on is a scoop and run law that we're trying to get the City of Chicago to actually implement. And this is piloted off of something that's going on in Philadelphia, and it's saving 80% of gunshot victims. And Scoop and Run basically talks about how whoever appears first, either the cops or the ambulance, they pick the person up and take them to the nearest trauma center. We know that if that would have happened in Courtney's case, Courtney would be alive to tell his story himself. But because the way the laws are written right now, police can interject, they can. That's what the language is saying, if they desire. But we know racism and prejudice always thwarts that type of behavior for them. They look at us and they were like, well, it's just a Black kid, or he's probably a gangbanger. They have all these preconceived notions and they decide not to act. Now, I do want to make a point as well, is that every officer that was on there, none of them were Black. They were either white or Hispanic. And so you have those type of, what I want to do as far as the scoop and run and changing the laws is to take that out of their hands. They don't get that decision anymore, because they're using race as a way to say that, well, we don't have to help this person. Because I often tell people as well, as with when I think about how if an officer is shot, they immediately spring into action. They close the roads, they turn the lights all green to make sure that that person gets the care. That is the care that all of our citizens of the United States deserve. It shouldn't be a respecter of person because they're a person in blue or they're military. A life is a life. What reason why we called it somebody is because Courtney was somebody to us. There is somebody out here who loves even the worst criminal on the face of the earth. There's somebody out here who loves them. And so we have to realize that if we make that change from the word can intervene to they must intervene, how many lives can be saved? And so that's the mission that we're on, to force the city of Chicago to make these changes.
I'll tell you that that's actually common. So I can think of 2 cases off the top of my head. One was on videotape where my clients were shot by Chicago police and left to bleed out on the sidewalk. Now, fortunately, these 2 gentlemen lived, but it's on video. I think one he was on the ground about 12 minutes just bleeding out, and both of them were shot in the chest. But that's common, and they just walk over their bodies. It's not like they're administering aid. It's not like they're on their chest trying to stop the bleeding. They are literally walking over them, doing their reports, talking on their radio, even if an ambulance is on scene. So please don't think that this only happened to Chaparral's son. This is quite common, at least in the city that we live in. But what I want to end with is, I want you to tell us what you want everybody to remember or everybody to know about your Courtney. Who is the Courtney that you loved, who all of us should be concerned about learning what actually happened to him? Give us a reason to want to know what happened to Courtney.
Well, like I tell everybody, that Courtney was literally everybody's son. He was everybody's friend. He was just such a bright young man. And I'm not saying it only because my son, the universe has given me validation in so many ways since his passing about the things that he was doing. And so one of the things that I often reflect on about Courtney is that they tell me that he made everyone feel special and he made everyone feel like they were his best friend. And one of the things that we were able to highlight in the podcast is that he had probably like 300 best friends. And I was like, wow, how great is that to have such a special quality to make everyone feel like they're your best friend. And that's what he did. Everybody was special to him. Everybody meant something to him. And I think that's why he is so sorely missed.
I can attest to that. I remember when Courtney died, because we had so many mutual friends because of World Ventures, everybody was posting, oh my God, Courtney was my best friend. Yeah, I can actually attest to that. Girls, guys, like I said, all races were saying that Courtney was their best friend. They had all these great pictures. But I'll add one thing, and he loved his mama.
Yeah.
Because there were a number of posts on his page about all the things that he wanted to do for you, all the things he wanted to do to make you proud. And I can say with certainty that all of your efforts in terms of investigating this horrible situation have made all of us proud. And I'm sure that Courtney would agree.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for being on here. So please download the award-winning podcast, Somebody. Please check it out today. Listen to a couple of episodes today if you can. This is just such an important story. And I think that Americans have this terrible habit that if it doesn't land at their doorstep, if it doesn't happen to them, that we tend not to care. I think we saw this with COVID initially. I definitely see it with criminal justice every day. Nobody cares unless it's their kid who got arrested. And I think that we need to change that. And this is a great opportunity for you to hear somebody else's anguish, hear how Chaparral is fighting for her son. I can't help but saying your efforts remind me of Mamie Till in so many ways, that you are just determined to find out what happened to your son as she was to find out what happened to Emmett. And I admire and applaud you for that. And so I really encourage people to learn more about Chaparral and her ministry, and learn more about Sharice and her ministry. And I will do my part to share this broad social justice movement with all of you. So with that being said, it's my time. My next show is on May the 6th at the same time, which is also a Friday. And I encourage you to follow me in the interim on at Justice Junkie, JUSTUSJUNKIE. I spell it a little differently. And that's on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok as of about 12 hours ago. So
Okay, I got a little,
thanks so much.
I got a little something for you before you get off the show, April. So we do have other comments that came in. Of course, you took all of your time, which is a great thing because you had really great guests. I mean, this was more than what I even anticipated, but your shows always are. So once I check the comment section, I'm going to post them in the radio show group, and I'll tag you. So if there's any questions that you can answer, or maybe bring someone else back to answer, we can continue that discussion there. And also, you were looking for a name for your show, and you still have not done that yet. And I came up with this great name. You know you're on mute, so I can't hear you.
It's laying down the law. I gave up on trying to
Oh, that's what you're gonna call it? See, I was thinking of
laying down the law.
Attorney April Preyar's legal expose, because you expose a lot of stuff on every show. But laying down the law is good too. You could toss those up. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I was going to continue the conversation in the group if there's any other comments that actually need a response to. Great show, ladies. Thanks for being there. Chapearl, my heart goes out to you. I'm a parent as well. And so, of course, any parent's heart is definitely going to go out to you. And Sharice, that was great information. I didn't even know all of that, but when I did know about the population and the fact that we're going to outnumber them soon. And that is a big deal. That is definitely a big deal. But I didn't know it had anything to do with the whole abortion thing. See how they come through the back door? They come through the back door on us. Great show, ladies. Thank you for being on here today. April, I shall check in with you next month then. So today is April 1st. And if you are listening to a replay of this show, be sure and catch the live shows on Mondays from 7 to 9 a.m. and Thursdays and Fridays from 12 to 2. Man, we just wrapped